Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. Now, when most people think of the 90s, they probably think of Rodney King, Monica Lewinsky, and Saddam Hussein. But you should also think of Carlos Santana. Well, wait, you idiot, he's part of the Woodstock generation. Yes, indeed, he was, and he put out some wonderful albums, arguably some of his best in the 70s, Caravanserai, and into the 80s, he was producing some great records as well. Blues for Salvador, for example. But the 90s began as a kind of barren period for Carlos Santana, as it did for many artists from that 60s, 70s, and 80s era, where a lot of people just went all the way through, riding the tide of a rock scene where big albums by polished and virtuosic artists sold big. But the music scene was changing in the 90s. Rock had lost a lot of its melodic flair. Hip hop was becoming the dominant lingua franca, the dominant style of music that was becoming the voice of pop music in place of rock. And amidst all of this, Carlos Santana gave himself a second chance, if you will. The being a huge artist, he would have always found a label. He parted ways with his longtime label Columbia, went with Arista, but that wasn't a problem. When you're someone with that pedigree, you'll get a deal. But what was truly impressive was the fact that he put together an album filled with guest stars, guest vocalists, guest instrumentalists, and each track had a different guest. And it's the kind of thing where if you were to hear it on paper, you would have thought, oh, that will sell among the aficionados, that will sell to the fan base. But it actually did something that few at the time expected. It became one of the biggest albums of all time and the biggest in Santana's career. And it's really, to me, it's a story of you never know what you're going to get with music, and more importantly, the music industry, and most importantly, with the music listening audience, because so many legacy artists by the 1990s were churning out half baked albums or good albums, but that didn't really sell. But Santana said, I'm going to do something that's just unique, and I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to produce it well. I'm going to write some great songs. I'm going to collaborate with some great artists. And lo and behold, it became explosive. It became huge. There was the single Smooth featuring Rob Thomas everywhere on the radio, and radio still mattered then. There was the song Maria Maria. Wyclef Jean, for instance, was on that track. Eric Clapton was on this album. Dave Matthews at the height of his popularity on this album. Larry Graham was on this album. So, Lauryn Hill, so many guest stars that were huge at that time and still are in many ways were on this album. And the following year, in the year 2000, all the way into the future, it won so many Grammys. And in some ways, it became the victim of its own success because it's one of those albums you can't follow it up. I mean, Santana's popularity has sustained, and his live shows were always super popular. But this album reintroduced someone from literally the Woodstock generation to both Gen Xers that may have missed him the first time around if they were on the younger side of Gen X, and certainly to the millennials of the 90s. It introduced his music to them, and who knows, maybe they went back and discovered Europa or E Como Va and all of the other great hits. So it just goes to show you in music, just because you think you're a legacy artist putting out a legacy album that's strictly for the connoisseurs, you can never really predict the taste of the general public. This album was always going to be musically good, but it became huge in popularity because, again, you just never know when you're going to strike a chord with the public. As always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.